International Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, who is the Executive Director of the Institute of Peace and Prosperity. Today we'd like to talk a little bit, Daniel, about what's going on in the Middle East and find out whether we have any good news. The first thing that popped up to me is what happened in Anbar province in Iraq. It looks bad. Ramadi, the capital, was taken over by ISIS, and it's a big deal. Anything favorable up in Syria that's going on?
Well, in Syria, the White House announced a successful raid against ISIS's oil minister, they call him. But what's significant about this raid is that it was the first time that we know of, admittedly, that U.S. troops actually were on Syrian soil, which of course is an invasion because they have not been given permission to do so. But they had an elaborate story of how airstrikes and a raid by the U.S. went in there and took out 40 militants. Not a civilian was harmed. No U.S. troops were hurt. Everything was successful. It sounds a little bit like the bin Laden story we're hearing about now was kind of phony.
We talk about Syria and Iraq as if they're two different wars, but really there's just this one war of our presence in the Middle East. But this taking over of Ramadi was described as a huge victory for ISIS. And what happened is the troops that we were supporting, the Iraqi troops, the Sunni troops, when they got surrounded, they panicked and fled. They said it was pandemonium, chaos. They got in some vehicles and started out the highways. They were all stopped, and they aborted the vehicles. And 60 or more, it was 60 vehicles, military vehicles that we had given them. Guess what? They're in the hands of ISIS right now. We never seem to learn that this kind of thing doesn't work.
No wonder ISIS is having so many victories that has all these fancy new U.S. weapons to deal with.
Yeah, that's for sure. They end up, and it seems like the people that we have on our side. But what does it do to our policymakers? You know, the people who are itching, they don't see this as a negative. You know, McCain, he had one. Immediately he says, McCain, get ready for U.S. troops on the ground in Iraq and Syria. Of course, he's been preaching that all along, but he sees this as another opportunity.
Well, bad news is good news for the neocons.
Yeah.
You know, the worse it gets because they're going to portray Obama as a wimp. He's trying to go in with just airstrikes when everyone knows we've got to go in on the ground again. And I think if anyone's had a huge victory out of this, it's the neocons and the interventionists.
You know, but it's the same old story. You know, we've lost a lot of troops. You know, they say it's under 5,000, but when you add up all the troops of the Middle East and contractors, 10,000 Americans have died. So, and you recall in the debates, I was so-called put on the spot by saying, well, you won't put them in. You mean you're going to make it so that these men all died in vain? Yeah. So they're willing to put more troops in and have them die to prove that they didn't die in vain. And you know, that's the way Vietnam kept escalating. Nobody wanted to ever have an American defeat, and yet, and look what happened. The same thing happens, and you know, if I had to predict, I would say that we are not going to walk out. You know, over the years, I had several positions. One was don't go in, and the second one was leave as soon as you can. You just marched in, just march home. Yeah. And now, don't just pretend you're leaving, leave in reality. And no, they keep staying around, and nothing ever changes. And yet, the real irony here, to me, is that the presidential candidates are pretty uniform. Yeah. I mean, Jeb Bush has been converted. It was a mistake. We shouldn't have started all this thing because, but we didn't know all the facts, which is a bunch of baloney because the facts were known.
They had to know them before they distorted them.
Yeah, but you notice that they all saying the same thing. It was a mistake, and you know, even guys like Santorum, and they're all changing their position. But at the same time, if you ask him, well, what should we do with ISIS? Well, we cannot stop. They're closer to McCain on that. You know, we have to fight them, have to go over. So it seems like they want to be in the middle. They don't want to have a really principled position. They don't want to say that we shouldn't intervene. We shouldn't have non-intervention like we would like to have. And they're not saying, well, ISIS is a uniform group of people, and even if it's not a country, Congress is going to declare war and go for victory. They don't do that either. It's always a little bit here, a little bit there, escalate, spend more money, more people get killed, and there are no victories.
You know, it makes, on this Ramadi thing, it makes me wonder, how much did our U.S. intelligence services know about the quality of the troops, the Iraqi troops that were there, the likelihood of an ISIS takeover? Did they see what was happening on the ground? You have to wonder what do you think?
Yeah, but they might know what emails you sent last night. I mean, they might be checking up on us and not checking up on so-called enemy. But that is it's a no-win situation. But I can just imagine what this looked like at Ramadi, the people panicking and running, and they were fleeing. And there was one quote from the Prime Minister said the Iraqi premier ordered the Iranian allies, the Iranian troops that are trying to help. So here it is, the Prime Minister is ordering the Iranians, which are the Shia, and he's ordering them to save their neck.
Yeah.
And at the same time, everything that we do, I think it's in Syria too. We're fighting governments, and we go in on the wrong side because, as far as I'm concerned, both sides are the wrong side. And then we end up not winning the victory, not protecting the person who might be a little bit more legitimate than the other. And we go in there, and what do? We build more enemies of ours. We recruit more for ISIS. And then we give them the weapons. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Someone sent me an email over the weekend where a few people were discussing what was happening in Syria. They said, well, they took out the oil minister, and someone wrote, well, what's for certain, they haven't taken out ISIS's recruiting stations.
Oh, boy, that's for sure, because this is the most important recruiting tool.
But, on one hand, we might agree with McCain that the administration's policy in the region is insane. It makes no sense at all. You talk about the White House spokesman denied we had absolutely no coordination with Assad when we went in and put our troops on the ground in his country. We never would. We think he has to go. But at the same time, Assad is the one who's fighting ISIS.
Yeah, no, I think giving McCain so-called credit for this is he is more in that camp that I described, all-out war versus all-out peace. So he's more determined to have that determination. And besides, one of his best friends, Dick Cheney, had something to say about this when this debate came up about the presidential candidates deciding whether it was a good idea or a bad idea. He says, it was a good idea. It's good that we did, because what we did, we made the world safer and we made our national security more secure.
Do you think Americans would really believe that, hearing this?
They don't. They don't. Even during the last campaign, most Americans were sick and tired of it, and that's why the Republicans got wiped out in 2008. But the disturbing thing is, and the real challenge for us, and those of us who oppose war on principle and want to defend ourselves only, when necessary, when these same people. See, the politicians like McCain want it, but a lot of Americans want it too. Right now, the PR by our media and our government and the politicians are that, if you aren't for all-out war to just kill them all because they're bad people and not realizing that we're the recruiting tool from them, then we're un-American, and it goes on. And then maybe in 10 years from now, after, we're totally bankrupt and ISIS is even stronger, then they'll say, well, it was a mistake. We should have pretended that if we help certain factions in Syria and certain factions in Iraq, and we will never have to commit any soldiers to their deaths, and we should just keep bombing people, that we're going to bring about peace and prosperity.
But by then they'll probably have another threat. This was a mistake, but now there's a new group. It's interesting. I'm sorry.
And what I was going to say, it might be China or something like that.
Well, it's interesting, just really quickly, to think back. I think sometimes Americans don't have a great memory on these things. It was only in July or August of last year that this whole thing was about a little group of an ethnic minority in Iraq, the Yazidis, who were stuck on a mountaintop, and we needed to go in for a very limited little operation to save these people. And the idea that there would be ground troops at that time, everyone said it's totally crazy. Not even McCain, I don't think, would have said it. But now, how this little operation has morphed into what looks like another major war.
I'm still leaning in my so-called predictions that they'll probably get what they want. I don't think they're ready to walk away and say, you know, we made a mistake. We marched in by mistake. We're going to march out and do it the correct way. So they'll probably be sending in more troops, and it's going to linger for a long, long time. But they more or less have announced that the war on terror is going to last for a long, long time, the long war, which means, you know, we have that, and that's what people concentrate on. But more and more people are waking up, hopefully more will, that the real war is here at home, against our liberties, against our financial system, having the one percenters manipulate the Federal Reserve System and the banking system, and they get richer and richer, the poor get poorer, and our liberties get less. That's where the real battle should be. But we have to reject this idea that we need an empire and it's to any benefit. It does not serve our interest, and it's such a lie when we tell young people that, well, you lost your legs because you were fighting for our freedom and you were fighting for our Constitution. That just tears me up, and people think we're cold and callous to be so honest, but for them to put blindfolders on and say, oh yeah, you know, 10,000 Americans killed, but like Cheney says, we're safer now. That's putting their head in the sand. It's not a good idea. Hopefully more and more people will wake up, not after the fact, but before the fact. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.